The morning sun cast long shadows across Bogotá's El Dorado airport as Avianca Flight 203 prepared for takeoff. Inside the Boeing 727, 110 passengers settled into their seats. Businessmen heading to Cali, families returning home, students going back to university. None of them knew they had just become pawns in Pablo Escobar's most ruthless gamble. In exactly 7 minutes and 4 seconds, their plane would explode over the Colombian countryside, and the world would witness the moment when the king of cocaine crossed a line so unthinkable that even his own allies would turn against him. But why would the most powerful drug lord in history sacrifice 110 innocent lives for one man? And how did this single act of terror seal his own death warrant? Cesar Gaviria wasn't supposed to be on that plane. The presidential candidate had changed his travel plans at the last minute, choosing to stay in Bogotá for a crucial campaign meeting. But Pablo Escobar's intelligence network hadn't received the update. As far as the cartel knew, Gaviria, the man promising to extradite Pablo to the United States, was about to board Flight 203. For months, Pablo had watched Gaviria's anti-drug campaign gain momentum across Colombia. Rally after rally, the candidate promised voters he would break the cartel's stranglehold on their democracy. He spoke of justice, of sovereignty, of taking back Colombia from the narcos. Each speech was another nail in Pablo's coffin. Pablo had already killed one presidential candidate, Luis Carlos Galán, 3 months earlier, gunning him down at a campaign rally in front of screaming supporters. But Galán's assassination had only made Gaviria more popular, more determined. The Colombian people were rallying around their new champion, and Pablo was running out of options. So he made a decision that would haunt Colombia forever. If he couldn't buy Gaviria and couldn't intimidate him, he would eliminate him along with anyone unlucky enough to be nearby. 2 days before the flight, Pablo's chief explosives expert, Denis Muñoz, received his most horrific assignment. Not a government building, not a police station, not even a competitor's warehouse, a passenger plane filled with innocent civilians. Muñoz had killed dozens of people with his bombs, but this felt different. Targeting specific enemies was business. Murdering random families was something else entirely. But refusing Pablo Escobar wasn't an option, not if you wanted to keep breathing. 5 kilos of dynamite, carefully packed into a briefcase with a timer mechanism. Enough explosive power to tear apart a Boeing 727 at 13,000 feet. The bomb was designed to detonate 7 minutes after takeoff, when the plane would be high enough that no one could survive the fall. But Pablo's meticulous planning contained one fatal flaw. He was about to murder 110 innocent people for nothing. Flight 203 lifted off from Bogotá's runway into the crisp morning air, climbing steadily over the Andean foothills. In the cabin, passengers were settling in for the routine 45-minute flight to Cali. A young mother was reading to her 6-year-old daughter. Business partners were reviewing contracts. University students were sleeping off weekend parties. At 7:20 a.m., exactly 7 minutes and 4 seconds after takeoff, the bomb exploded. The blast tore through the passenger compartment like an invisible monster, instantly depressurizing the cabin and sending the Boeing 727 into an uncontrolled spin. Passengers were thrown against the ceiling as the plane began its death spiral toward the earth. Metal twisted and screamed as the aircraft broke apart in mid-air. For 43 seconds, 110 people fell through the Colombian sky, conscious and terrified, knowing they were about to die. The wreckage spread across 5 miles of farmland, burning cornfields and destroying homes. When rescue teams arrived, they found no survivors, only scattered pieces of lives that would never be whole again. Pablo Escobar had just committed mass murder for a man who wasn't even on the plane. Within hours of the explosion, Pablo received the news that would shatter his world. Cesar Gaviria had never boarded Flight 203. The presidential candidate was alive, holding a press conference in Bogotá, condemning the attack and promising swift justice for the victims. Pablo had murdered 110 innocent people for absolutely nothing, but the phone call that truly changed everything came 3 days later, not from government officials or rival cartels, but from Pablo's own organization. His most trusted lieutenants were questioning the attack. His sicarios were expressing doubts. Even his family was horrified by the indiscriminate slaughter. For the first time in his criminal career, Pablo Escobar had crossed a moral line that even his own people couldn't accept. The massacre of Flight 203 had transformed him from a feared drug lord into something far worse, a terrorist who killed innocent families for strategic advantage. The bombing's aftermath was swift and devastating. The Colombian government, under enormous public pressure, escalated its war against the cartels. International support poured in from governments horrified by the civilian casualties. The United States increased intelligence sharing and military assistance. But Pablo's greatest enemy wasn't external, it was internal. The Flight 203 bombing had fundamentally changed how Colombians viewed him. Before the attack, many saw him as a Robin Hood figure who challenged corrupt elites. After the massacre, he became a monster who murdered children to achieve political goals. Former allies began cooperating with authorities. Information networks dried up. Safe houses were exposed. Pablo's empire, built on a foundation of fear and loyalty, began crumbling from within. The man who had once controlled presidents and judges now couldn't trust his own bodyguards. For 3 years after Flight 203, Pablo lived as a fugitive in his own kingdom. Every day brought new losses. Sicarios captured, laboratories destroyed, family members arrested. The Colombian government had created elite search units trained by American special forces, equipped with advanced technology and motivated by national outrage. But Pablo's downfall wasn't caused by superior tactics or technology. It was caused by isolation. The bombing had made him radioactive even to other criminals. Drug dealers who had once sought his partnership now avoided association with him. Politicians who had taken his bribes publicly condemned his methods. Pablo Escobar, who had built his empire by understanding human nature, had finally misjudged it catastrophically. He had assumed that Colombians would accept any level of violence if it served their economic interests. Instead, he discovered that some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. When Colombian police finally cornered Pablo Escobar on that Medellin rooftop, he wasn't just running from law enforcement. He was running from the ghosts of Flight 203. Every step across those ceramic tiles was haunted by 110 innocent voices demanding justice. As bullets found their target and Pablo's body slid down the angled roof, investigators found something telling in his pocket, a worn photograph of the Flight 203 wreckage. Even in his final months, the bombing had consumed his thoughts, perhaps the only act that had ever made him question his own choices. Pablo Escobar's empire lasted 15 years and generated billions in profits, but it was ultimately destroyed in 7 minutes and 4 seconds, the time it took for Flight 203 to explode and fall from the sky. That single act of terror revealed the fundamental truth about power built on violence. It inevitably consumes not just its victims, but its perpetrators. The 110 passengers who died that November morning never knew they were making history, but their sacrifice became the moral turning point that transformed Colombia's most feared criminal into its most hunted fugitive. Their innocent blood finally awakened a nation's conscience and proved that even the mightiest empire will collapse when it declares war on human decency itself. In death, those passengers achieved something that years of government operations couldn't. They showed Pablo Escobar that there are some victories that guarantee your ultimate defeat.